Hello YouTubers. So if you've been following my video, you'll know that I did the front suspension, the quick struts on both the left side and the right side at the front, and I also did the upper control arms at the front too on both sides. I'm now doing the rear. Now for the rear, what you want to do first of all is, I don't have a lot of space here, but you probably want to raise the vehicle using one of these stands. But first you want to use a jack and you want to raise it somewhere on the chassis. Okay, not on the suspension. Okay, so you want to raise the vehicle there and be able to then take the tire off. So first thing you want to do is just loosen the lug nuts. And then once the vehicle's raised, you can then take the wheel off. Okay, so I'll get back to you once I've done that part. Okay, so once you've got your jack stand in, right there you can see it's leaning on the chassis part right there. That's where the suspension starts, on that nut. Where that nut starts, you can see that this will all be part of the suspension. So you want it ahead of that nut, not after that nut, ahead of it. That's where you're supporting the vehicle up. The reason for that is now you want to be able to position your jack at the back of the vehicle and position your jack right under the suspension, the axle, the solid axle, because this is a solid axle vehicle, so the whole suspension goes up and down together. So you want to position it right there, position the jack right there so that you can move it up and down as you're getting the bolts. Here's the old suspension. What you want to now do is you only have 2 bolts on this one. It's nowhere near as difficult as the one on the front. So you want to put some penetrating oil in there, let it soak for a bit. That's 15 mil on the top, and I think that's 18 mil at the bottom, if I can remember correctly, but don't quote me on that. So put some penetrating oil on there, let it soak for a little bit, and then you can, and in the meantime while that's soaking, position your jack right underneath there so that it supports, doesn't support, but it's just touching the axle as you're loosening these nuts. Okay, so once the penetrating oil's been on there for a little while, you can leave it to soak for as long as you want to. What I tend to do is I use a wire brush and I just clean this part here because it makes it so when you put the socket on there, it gives it a nice tight fit. It takes all the dirt off, but also with it now being wet with penetrating oil, it just means all the dust doesn't fly into your face and you don't breathe it in. So it's sort of wet, so that's fine. So I clean all the nuts that I'm going to loosen, and the same here. So I try to, so it gives it as much of a tight fit as I can. Then what you want to have here is, this one is a 15. That's a 15 that fits onto there. And on this side you have an 18 that fits onto there, and then to stop it from spinning you put a 15. I usually put a 15 on there, and then I can hold it, or if it gets a bit too difficult to hold, then what I tend to do is I'll position it so that when this is here and it's spinning a bit, it will hit against the axle there, and that will hold it in place. So then I can just use all my force. On the other side I have a very good breaker bar which can help to do that. So once I get to that stage, I'll get back to you. Okay, so what I've done is I've slightly loosened this top bolt, and I've taken off the bottom bolt. Okay, so the bottom bolt's been taken off, but what you find is it's quite hard to remove that. And if I tap it with a hammer, it's still quite hard. And that's because the weight of the vehicle is still on this nut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack it up just very slightly, and that will take a little bit of pressure on this off this nut, just very slightly, just so that it compresses the springs very little, just a tad bit, and then this nut will not have as much pressure on it, and then it will easily come out. Okay, so now that I just tapped that one out, I can go ahead and continue to loosen the one at the top. Just give me a second. Okay, sorry about that, I just lost you there for a minute. Okay, so what now is, with the bottom one taken out, you can continue to loosen this one here. And as you're loosening that, you can just use a hammer and okay, so now what it'll do is, when you do take it out and it drops, it'll drop on the floor as opposed to drop on the vehicle. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just take this nut out, and the old shock should come out. Okay, so the old shock is out. Now what I tend to do is just clean up around here. You're going to put the new shock in, so you don't want to all this muck to be in the way. Just clean up around here, and the same down there is just clean up with your wire brush on both the inside and outside over there, and then you can put the new shock in. So I'm gonna just do that, and then I'll tell you how to get the new shock in. Okay, so I've got the new strut out, and there it is there. So you see, so you want to put the top end in first and put the bolt in, and then put the bottom end in. Does it go this way or does it go this way? I don't know. They both look the same to me. On the other end, I just made it so that the sticker is facing outwards. As far as I know, that those two both look the same. I don't know which way goes in or which one's here. The old one I took out didn't really make any difference. So I'm putting them this way so that this sticker is on the outside, I suppose. Also, what you want to make sure is use the wire brush on your old nuts. Clean any rust off, and then what I always do on any of them, put I don't think you can see it there. Put anti-seize on all your nuts and bolts as you bring them in. It just means next time if you're doing the job for someone else, it makes it that much easier for them. So what you can do now is put the top bolt in, just loosely. You don't need to get it all torqued up, but just loosely, and then you work on the bottom one. As you're working on the bottom one, you raise the vehicle up. So I'll put the top one, and then you know what I mean. This blue strap, leave that on for now. I left it on when I did the other side, and then you can always cut it off later on. What it means is that if you open it, it might start to expand, and might make it easier for you to put it on, but I'm just leaving it on for now. Okay, so once with the top one in, you can see that it's just free hanging, but the top one's in. It's tight. It's not to torque, but it's tight. But it's still, enough to swing, but it's not going anywhere. And then you'll see that when you look up right here, if I bring that back, it lines up directly with the holes for the bracket it's going to fix onto. Now, what we have is a gap. As you'll see there's a gap. So how do we lift that up? Well, the vehicle's being held up by this here from the actual body, the frame of the vehicle, this chassis. So what we can do here is just lift up the vehicle from the suspension. So what you'll see is that I have it positioned right there under the solid axle, under the suspension. And what I'm going to do, let me just move this light so we don't break it. I can place it there. So what we're going to do is just raise the vehicle. Well, we're not raising the vehicle, we're just raising the suspension. And you can see the springs compressing. And we're just going to get a bit of an idea of where the two line up. So you should see right at the back of the picture the new suspension. You can see me compressing. You can see the new shock right at the back. You can see me compressing the spring with the jack. And when you think the two are going to line up, so now when I bring it over here, okay, just have a look. You can see that I've lifted it up a bit too much, but if I lower it a little, I should be able to line that up and it will fit. Okay, so I'm going to do that because I'm finding it really hard to do it with the camera in my hand. Sorry, I'm not really good at this, so I'm going to need both hands on my jack. Let me see. I think if I just... Yeah, I'm going to need two hands, so I'll get back to you. Okay, so you can see, I think I was giving the wrong information before. I just needed to lower it, raise it. I was looking at it from upside down, so I was getting a bit mixed up that I need to lower it. But you can see now that it's lined up and the nut will go in. But what I'm noticing is that if I move it straight back, it's actually banging into there, and I'm having to bring it out towards me and then fit it in. So what I might do is I might just switch this around, just turn it around the other way, because I know on one side there was a bit more of a gap than the other. So maybe I need that clearance, but I'll see. Hold on. Okay, so I left the top nut as it is because I know at the moment I have it so that there's less gap on this side and more gap on that side. And if I switched it around, it would have just pushed it further away from me. So I actually want less gap on this side. So it's fine as it is. And as you can see now, it's all lined up. The nuts in. And all you need to do now is just tighten all this up, and then you can tighten it up and then use your torque and set it to the torque settings, and then just cut this safety strap, plastic safety strap, and then you can put the wheel on. Okay, so tighten that up. What you want to do now is torque it. So your top nut is at 80 foot-pounds and your bottom one is 85 foot-pounds. So you got your torque wrench here, so I've set it to 80 and I will do that. What I then did is lower the suspension and then just check the torque settings again. Sorry, before you do that you have to cut the wire, so just give me 1 sec. Okay, so that's been torqued now at 80 for the top one and 85 for the bottom one. And then what you want to do is cut the blue cable, cut the safety before you lower it, because if you lower it first it's going to snap it or do some damage, I don't know. So let's do that. Let's cut this. So once that blue safety strap has been cut off, you want to make sure there's no other obstructions as you lower the suspension. So I'm just going to move this light out the way, make sure there's no other obstructions just as I lower the suspension. And then the weight of the vehicle now, well, the shock will be stretch a little. So once again, I'm hoping you can see that. I just positioned my phone somewhere. Okay, so you see that the jack is slowly coming down, the suspension is slowly coming down. And you can see I left my spanner in there. That's because when I was torquing it, I usually get in. Let's see if we can get that out. No, okay. You stop there. Okay, so we stop that. Okay, that's out. We don't want to damage our equipment or damage anything else. Okay, right, so now that's out. So what I do now is, just because the way I do things, I'm just going to recheck the torque settings on those, but you'll see now that the suspension is longer, because it's extended now, because so recheck the torque settings, and once the torque settings are fine, we can then put the wheel back on. Once the wheel's back on, then we can torque the lug nuts for the wheel, and that would be it. Okay, so some videos that you may have seen on YouTube, they also replaced the springs as well. I asked around at many places and everyone told me the same thing, that you don't need to replace the springs if they're not cracked or broken. Okay, if they're not cracked or broken, you don't need to replace the spring. Basically, it's just a piece of metal wire that's coiled round, and nothing really to go wrong with that. And if the vehicle was sagging or they need replacing, then chances are we'd know now. And I don't do any off-road rock climbing with this Jeep anyhow, so I think they're fine the way it is. There's no point going through the extra work or through the extra expenditure of replacing those. There's a bit of surface rust on them, but that's to be expected anyhow. So that's fine there. As you can see, I did the ones that were at the front, and I'm pretty anal about replacing everything that needs to be replaced. Look at that. But I'm going to leave those as they are. So once you've put your wheels back on, for all of them, you've got your wheels back on. What you then want to do, because this is still off the ground, right? So what you then want to do is then bring the jack back round to this side, lift your vehicle up, knock this stand back down, pull it out, and then you're done. What you want to do is then get your torque wrench, get your 19mm on here, get your torque wrench, set it to, this one is 110 foot-pounds, and torque all your lug nuts on your wheels. And then after about 50 to 100 kilometers, again, after 100 kilometers, just check all your, retorque the lug nuts again. And that's it, and that's how you do the shocks on a 2002 Jeep Liberty Thanks for watching.